It feels increasingly as if rugby's axis of power is shifting. Where once England harbored delusions of grandeur at being the premier club destination in the world, such status has now been definitively annexed by France. If the loss of Joe Marchant to Stade Francais smacked of misfortune, the failure to stop Henry Arundell hightailing it to Racing 92 looked more like carelessness. Against this backdrop, reports that Owen Farrell is in advanced talks to join his young international teammates across the channel offer a damning indictment of how much the lustre of English rugby has dimmed. Once, the notion of Farrell forsaking England seemed preposterous. For a decade he has been the country's hardiest perennial, its World Cup linchpin, the one figure around whom Steve Borthwick would happily rearrange every other piece of furniture. But these realities have been starkly recast since that bruising campaign in France, where the captain found himself booed by some of his own fans. Already he has taken a leave of absence to prioritize his mental health. And if he can regard even the Six Nations as dispensable, it follows that he might start to ask himself whether a career of unquestioning loyalty to the England cause is worth the bother any longer. Even Borthwick has expressed doubt as to whether Farrell would don the white jersey again. In his most recent comments on the number 10's decision to step away, he described himself merely as hopeful that Farrell would return. The longer the separation goes on, the less likely it becomes that he will seamlessly rejoin the fold. The shock linked to racing makes these questions more urgent than ever. After all, Farrell, as England's playmaker, is not the type who can casually glide in and out of the setup. If he does choose to decamp to the top 14, it is a reasonable working assumption that he will turn his back on England for good if Borthwick can ill afford for the move to go ahead. As fly-half, Farrell is England's fulcrum, the one player who epitomizes the attritional, kick-heavy approach that the head coach is striving to create. In his repeated reintegrations of Farrell at the expense of George Ford and Marcus Smith, Borthwick has suggested that his captain's presence is critical to England's success. Except the mood music from France suggests the old certainties are fast dissolving. On the surface, you can understand the temptations for Farrell to relocate. At 32, he has more prime playing years behind him than ahead, and he gives every impression of having grown exhausted by the withering scrutiny of his every move. France offers the chance not just of reinvention but rejuvenation, with the top 14 now firmly established as the most vibrant and physically intense club championship on the planet. Last season's final between Toulouse and La Rochelle was a feast for the senses, while the system of promotion and relegation has generated constant intrigue. With this exotic alternative available, why should Farrell contemplate dithering a moment longer in England, where the sclerotic premiership has just seen 3 clubs go to the wall in a single campaign? The answer, of course, is the call of international duty. The Rugby Football Union has made it clear that it will only call up players based overseas for England in special circumstances. While Arundell would earn dispensation, having been left without a club since London Irish went out of business, Farrell, still playing for Saracens throughout his period of self-enforced England exile, would not have an automatic right to the same treatment. And for a player who has depicted the captaincy of his country as the honor of his life, an irrevocable severing of ties would surely be a wrench. But the order of Farrell's life is in flux. Where once his eligibility for England was non-negotiable, it now appears a worthwhile sacrifice for his well-being. And where once the Premiership was his only natural habitat, the kudos of his home league has now been emphatically eclipsed by the proposition in front of him in France. If Farrell does resolve to make the leap, it will say much more about the diminishing pull of English rugby than about the values of the man himself.